I don't know where to start with this shit. Love Hurts was written and illustrated by Suzuki Tanaka. It was published in Japan in 2004 and was given an English translation in 2010. I've always wanted to review manga on this channel, and while I probably could have chosen a better one that I've already read, I decided to tear this band-aid off first. If Suzuki Tanaka sounds familiar to any of my viewers, she's best known for her boys' love series, His Favorite, which has taken off in popularity since its conception in 2012. I have yet to read His Favorite, but since it's published by the same company that published my favorite romance manga, Hide and Seek, I'll probably give it a look over eventually. Though, here's to hoping that this book isn't indicative of Tanaka's usual writing style, because fuck me with a spiked bat, this is horrendous. This is an anthology of sorts. It's a conglomeration of 4 stories that revolve around love. Basic, yes, but completely doable. When I saw the cover, I thought maybe this was going to be a series of cautionary tales about the dangers of abusive love. I mean, hell, the kid on the cover has a black eye. If that was the case, this review would be very different. But it's not. Also, please note, while I have a properly translated physical copy, I had to go to a manga fan site to get the pictures for this review, so some of the dialogue is incorrect. I did change a couple in Microsoft Paint, but for the most part, they should be okay for the review. In order to plot what all is wrong with this, I'm gonna have to just go through and tell each story separately. Story number 1, Unforgivable. A man named Sumiyoshi, a rather useless bum who can't keep a job and plays video games all day, is murdered by his lover Koji. The story starts with Sumi's friend, whose name is never revealed, discovering the body with Koji nearby. The logical thing to do would be to call the police, right? Nope. Instead, the blonde-haired asshole starts looking through the dead man's apartment, looting his stuff because apparently Suji owed him money. Then some other nameless asshole pops in, because why not, and all 3 of them sit around the table after pillaging through the dead man's fridge, eating and drinking while his body is literally 2 feet away from them. They dump way more exposition than any sane man would care to read, with the blonde-haired friend going on about how he basically raped Sumiyoshi at one point, stating that he forcefully seduced him, and how Sumi was a slob but he still loved Koji. After, Koji loses his shit, screams that he's the one who killed him, and throws the others out. He cuddles his lover's dead body, and the story ends. Story number 2, Two in Love. Koharu, an underage student, is currently living with and fucking his teacher Kirihara. After a nasty fight with Koharu, Kirihara's sensei goes to work and is accosted by a creepy-ass student that tells him she's murdered people before. All the while, Koharu is talking with their neighbor Naomi-san, and they babble on about how Sensei and Koharu aren't actually dating even though they fuck each other, and how Koharu loves another guy who is actually straight, a topic that's never brought up again. It has no relevance to the story. After talking to the creepy murder girl, Kirihara runs into a random guy and beats the shit out of him. Then he goes home, gets into a fight with Koharu, and they beat the shit out of each other. Creepy murder girl calls Kirihara and tells him that she can set him up with a hitman that can make it easier to murder people. Sensei goes to meet this guy, and that's when we learn that the guy Sensei punched is actually some religious bum that's been leeching off Koharu because the religious guy apparently raised Koharu after his family died. Kirihara decides not to kill the religious guy, which makes the entire subplot with the creepy murder girl moot. He goes home, he and Koharu fight again, then they cuddle and fall asleep, and the story ends. Story number 3, The Fate of a Crime Fighter's Love. Failed businessman Amagi is set to go out with some friends after work, but bolts because he apparently is a crime fighter and he spies a villain nearby. He chases the guy into an alley and nearly gets killed before a childhood friend shows up and scares the guy off. The rest of the story is them bitching at each other, with his friend Toma spouting off nonsense about how he could have had his powers taken. Keep in mind, we never actually see them use their powers, we're just told that they exist. Then, after a heated fight, Toma kisses Amagi. Amagi saves a coworker with a rather creepy fucking face. I mean, seriously, she's the only one who looks like this. And Toma reveals that he's staying in Tokyo so they can be together, and the story ends. The final story is Kanako's story. Kanako is a girl who keeps telling people that she has an alien in her head. She starts dating a childhood friend who feels sorry for the fact that people make fun of her. They talk a bit. Aliens come back after a meteor shower to take the alien from her brain. She reveals the alien's still there despite there never being any reason for it to be, and the story ends. Okay. Some glaring issues, and I have a list. So, without further ado... Unforgivable is nothing but exposition dialogue, with characters the mangaka didn't even care enough to name. Instead of using the artistic medium to her advantage by showing bills laying around or Sumi's fridge being empty, they have to explain to us constantly how much of a slob he is. Two in Love is about a teenager fucking his teacher and who is routinely abused by said teacher. Then this teacher has a stalker girl who has no bearing on the plot. She could have been taken out completely and it wouldn't have mattered. The subplot with him wanting to murder the religious guy goes nowhere, and it ends with his abused partner and him deciding to stay together because of love. And no, there's no indication that any of these stories are cautionary tales. This one especially, it's played up as it's okay to stay with the man who beats you because why not? The fate of a crime fighter's love is the closest thing to a feasible story in this. It's definitely the longest, but it's also the most disappointing. Despite apparently being crime fighters, there's no setup to Amagi and Toma's powers. They just talk about it, give each other "I wanna fuck you" eyes, and scream constantly. There's a subplot about how they grew up in a village and the first person to catch this criminal wins, and the loser has to leave for Tokyo, or has to leave Tokyo. But that goes nowhere because Toma loses and still stays in Tokyo. Finally, there's Kanako's story, which is probably the most nothing of all the stories in this thing. It's literally a girl saying, "I have an alien in my head," and her boyfriend's all, "That's nice," and then she's like, "The alien's gone," and he goes, "I'll miss the alien," and she says, "But the alien's still here," the end. None of these stories have any semblance of character development. Hell, some of the characters don't even get names. Despite the author's attempts to have plots, they're shallow, superficial, and uneventful. It also showcases issues of rape and relationship abuse, and it showcases them in a welcoming light, as if it's something we should want in a relationship. Nothing about this book is remotely coherent. Halfway through, there was this little excerpt from Tanaka, where she states that she was rushed by her editor to finish the stories, which might explain why they do feel rushed, but I still don't consider that a viable excuse. I'm not saying manga anthologies can't work, I just have yet to read one that isn't the literary equivalent of a diseased queef. The only thing of note I can say is the illustrations are nice. Nothing spectacular, but nothing bad. They're perfectly serviceable. I'll give it that. Regardless, Love Hurts gets a 0. There's absolutely nothing redeemable about this whatsoever. Alright, I have a review of Kavanaugh Rules coming up. It was one of those books that came in like a twofer pack, kind of like Silent Night, Deadly Night, and Mistletoe Madness. I read the first one, might get to the second one eventually, but I think I'll just stick with the first one right now. It was painful enough. I'll see you guys later.